How does government spending as a percentage of GDP differ globally? Imagine looking at how countries spend their money and how big their economies are at the same time. That's what government spending as a percentage of gross domestic product, or GDP, shows us. It tells us how much of a country's total economic output is used by the government for things like healthcare, education, and public services. But this number isn't the same everywhere. Some countries spend a lot more of their GDP on government activities, while others spend less. In wealthier countries, especially those in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the European Union, government spending tends to be higher. For example, in 2024, these countries spent about 42.6% of their GDP on government activities. Countries like Finland, France, Austria, Belgium, and Italy spend even more, often over 50%. These nations have large social programs, health care systems, and public services that requiring significant funding. Their governments play a big role in everyday life, which shows up in these higher spending numbers. On the flip side, some countries spend a lot less of their GDP on government. India, for example, spends around 14.8% of its GDP on government activities. That means a smaller part of the economy is managed by the government, and more is left to private businesses and individuals. Countries like Switzerland and Hungary also have lower government spending ratios, sometimes just a few percentage points of their GDP. They tend to relying more on private sector services or have different priorities when it comes to government involvement. In emerging and developing economies, the numbers can vary a lot. Some Latin American countries and others in Africa or Asia spend between 20 and 40% of their GDP on government activities. These differences depend on how developed the country is, how much money they have, and what their social needs are. Countries with fewer resources often spend less because they have to focus on basic needs and economic growth. From a big picture view, how much a country spends relative to its GDP tells us a lot about its economy and government role. When governments spend more, they can boost economic activity and provide safety nets for their people. But they also need to manage their budgets carefully to avoid debt problems. Countries that spend less might have fewer public services, but they also might have more room for private investment and market-driven growth. Looking at what governments spend on also helps us understand their priorities. Healthcare usually takes up about 8.4% of GDP in many advanced countries. Education accounts for nearly 5%, and general public services, including paying off debt, make up about 6%. Spending on environmental protection is usually small, around 0.5% of GDP. In the end, the way countries spend their money shows their values and economic strategies. Advanced nations tend to allocate more to social programs, while developing countries often spend less but focus on growth and basic needs. Knowing these differences helps us see how governments influence their economies and the lives of their citizens.